Okay, let's continue.
Thank you. Ms. Natterson, if I recall your testimony earlier, you indicated that the farming venture had been discussed with, amongst others, Mr. Van Wyk as early as 2015, in the course of 2015. Is that correct? If you'll just put on the microphone. Thank you.
It happened in October that we started that discussion, and Brian happened to hear us debating the farming, and in fact it was mostly the logistics first, and then the farming venture would have been a consequence of the logistics enterprise.
And that's October 2015?
That's right.
Thank you. And then you certainly knew about it and the passage that it had followed by October 2017. Is that correct?
Yes, there's quite a bit of evolution of the project along the way, yes.
And can I just ask, when were you first alerted to the fact that the funds that you had held, well, Neo Solutions had held for Mr. Van Wyk, were suspect in any way or could have been involved in unlawful activities?
It was when Mr. Udil brought it to my attention.
And that, as I had from your evidence, was in about September 2017. Is that correct?
That's right.
Thank you. If we can then go to page 8 of DD 10A. I'd like to pick it up, if we may, at paragraph 12 there. If you wouldn't mind reading what you've recorded at paragraph 12.
It should be noted that Van Wyk gave me undertakings that these funds were proceeds from a business venture, and he was going to use these funds to set up a business. He only requested these funds in March, as he stated that these were now setting up a business venture in preparation of his departure from SA Express.
Thank you. And let me just ask, sorry, before I go to the actual text of that paragraph, Ms. Natterson, I understand your evidence. It was Mr. Van Wyk who gave the instructions as to when and to whom these various amounts had to be paid. Is that correct?
Yes.
You weren't making those decisions yourself, independently of Mr. Van Wyk, were you?
Not at all.
If we can just return to paragraph 12 then. What I want to pick up on there is, as you recorded here, you say, Mr. Van Wyk gave me undertakings that these funds were proceeds from a business venture, and he was going to use these funds to set up a business. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes on and it says he only requested those funds in March, as he stated that he was now setting up his business venture. Do you see that?
Yeah.
I'm interested in that because do you agree with me that there's no mention in this paragraph of the farming venture? Is that right?
Yes.
There's no mention anywhere else in the declaration of the farming venture. Is that correct?
Yes.
And this seems to suggest, at least to the reader, that it's about his business that he's going to be embarking upon, and he needs to park the funds for a period of time. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Can I further clarify?
Indeed.
Yeah. So it also, remember, there was funds drawn in December.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah,
I accept. Is that a correction you would make
that's
to
a
paragraph
correction
12?
because
Yes.
the first amount, I think, Chair, just to put you, because I don't think we discussed the
Yes.
rationale behind each of those payments. So we received the monies in November. In December, Brian had called, Van Wyk had called me to say that he urgently required a portion of the cash because he wished to buy another property, I think it was in Blue Valley, Gulf Estate, and he wanted a portion remitted to him. So I said to him in the call, it's fine, it's your money, you're well entitled to take it back. And then obviously as the ventures get undergoing, because the farming venture was still a process, so he undertook to bring funds back in for his equity stake as and when needed for the farming venture to kick off. But in December he had requested a portion, and he drew out the two tranches of the 4 million and the 3 million.
Well, what was going to be the amount, more or less, that would have been required in your estimation from both of you for purposes of the farming business that you were contemplating going into, the two of you?
The initial model was a total capex value of 100 million. We were hoping to secure a loan then of 80%, and we assumed the bank would ask us for a 20% equity contribution. So I had to come up with 10, and he was going to have to come up with 10.
But as I understand the position and I may have misread this. The money came on the one day, and the following day, at least a large portion of it had to be paid out.
No, there was a time lag. I think that if you follow the timeline, the funds arrived into our account on the 11th and 12th of November 2015, right? The first draw that he ever did out was then in December, on the 11th of December, almost a month later. Okay, and then on the 22nd, he took a further 3 million. So there was a passage of time was at least a month before he took any of the money back.
And at this stage, you still didn't suspect anything wrong with this?
It made sense from discussions he had informally with us that he was a huge fan of Blue Valley, and he had at some point said he was looking to upgrade his house there. So I took it on the face value that he was needing these funds to secure a home that he wanted to buy.
Did you ever get to know what types of businesses he was talking about that had given him these millions?
He didn't indicate specifically that. When he mentioned Northwest Province, I assumed it related to a project of an industrial nature. He mentioned that they were construction and manufacturing, that he had interest in those. But I didn't ask specifics.
Yeah, I continue to have difficulty with you accepting to keep such large amounts of money that do not belong to you on the basis of a request made by somebody. I mean, at that time, how long had you known him?
About close on 18 months to 2 years.
Yeah. That you keep such large amounts for him, either because the two of you are contemplating going to business together, but also because he is scared that his employer might conduct lifestyle audits, and then these amounts he wants to take them out, and they are taken out. Throughout this period, you don't have any suspicion that there is something wrong about this.
Chair, if from my understanding of what's in the media and so on around these monies that have flowed from state entities and being moved through, for me there was comfort in the fact that he didn't ask for his money straight away. So when it arrived, it was sitting there. So if he was moving state money, generally the condition has been, and from all the media that's been around, it would arrive today and get clean or transferred to new entities almost immediately. So I was almost feeling a sense of comfort that he wasn't asking for this money. In fact, the December request that he made was incidental on him buying a house, rather.
Well, if you say you were deriving comfort from that, that suggests that it did cross your mind that there could be something wrong with this, but then you said, well, he's not asking for the money. Did it cross your mind that this could be, there could be something illegal about this money?
It crossed when I was asking him, when he first suggested that he was going to bring it. At that point, yes, the first question I would ask is this money clean or from a clean source or a reputable source? At that point, yes, I had to make sure it wasn't, or I had to satisfy myself then that it wasn't state money. And he gave those undertakings. And the fact that he didn't call for that money quickly gave me further assurance.
Yeah, you see, if I go back to the questions that we dealt with, you must forgive me, but I'm trying to give you a picture of where my difficulty is so that you get a chance to give me your perspective, you know. I still just have this difficulty that somebody has these large amounts, millions, that he doesn't want to touch his bank account, refers to lifestyle audits from his employer, and wants you to keep that amount. He doesn't want to keep it himself. That doesn't say to you there must be something wrong with this.
I think, Chair, in the context of the discussions at the time, he got close to us. And
Sorry, just repeat that.
I'm saying at the context of what happened at that time, in October 2015, he was very friendly, he was always around us. And to an extent, yes, my guard would have dropped a bit in that I trusted that this guy is a businessman. He's wanting to do business with us. He's given me assurances that this money is clean and appropriate and that we're going to go into a long-term enterprise. So I didn't suspect that he would now bring money into us that actually might bring the whole business venture into disrepute or bring risk to it.
Thank you.
Mr. Natterson, when you engage in business ventures in the ordinary course and when Neo Solutions is going to provide some services attached to those business ventures, do you always ask the people with whom you're getting into business whether their funds are clean?
Not necessarily, because most of the ventures we deal with don't involve people that are with the state, that are employed by the state. Well, all of them. I think this was the first instance, and that's why I asked the question that I did.
So there's never been another occasion when you've asked a potential partner about whether their funds are clean?
No, I didn't feel it was necessary to do so.
So something, just back to the chair's probing earlier, something about this made you want to ask that question.
Correct.
Is that
Well,
right?
the fact that he was still an employee of the state made me ask it.
Well, I'm not sure I understand your evidence that it's the fact that he was employed by the state that made you ask the question. I would have thought that the reason why you asked him whether the money was clean was because you wanted to avoid keeping somebody's money that was linked to criminality,
Yes.
irrespective of whether the state was involved or not. Is that not what the concern was
100%.
about?
I think the context of the question was what triggered me in asking the question. The
Yeah,
trigger
yes,
was
no,
the
no,
fact
I,
that it was
I
state.
understand
But
that.
obviously, I would never allow a criminal or allow the company to be used deliberately or intentionally for a criminal act in that way.
So therefore, the fact that he was employed by the state should have been neither here nor there.
In my mind, it was one of the triggers that made me ask that question at that point in time. But I agree, when we do business with anyone, you wouldn't want that business to be exposed in any way.
Because it creates the impression as if you didn't want to be involved in any illegal money if the state was involved.
Yes.
But you didn't mind if the state was not involved.
No, no.
That's the impression it creates in my mind.
No, the converse is not true in that instance.
Well, I would have thought that all you said is, if I'm going to keep anybody's money, I want to know that it's clean, irrespective of whether
That's
the
true.
state is
That's
involved
true.
or not.
Yes, that's true.
But you've never had occasion to ask anyone else ever?
No.
I'd then like to just pick up on a few things in relation to your testimony in response to the chair's questions. You mentioned that you thought it was envisaged that the venture would involve about 100 million rand. Is that correct?
The initial thinking was there, but the applications ended up much different. At the end, the final business case was much different to that.
Right, so are we talking about as it was envisaged in October 2015?
Correct.
Right. And as I understand, you were going to get a loan for 80%, and then each of you and Mr. van Wyk were going to contribute 10 million. Is that correct?
Correct.
Right. Then we move from November, when the funds come in, to December, when the funds start going out. Understood your evidence to be he called you in relation to the 4 million, that was the first tranche that went out, and made reference to a property he was purchasing in Blue Valley. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then a few days later, tell us what explanation he gave for the 3 million.
It was the same issue, for the same property.
Did he specifically say that, or was that an assumption you made?
That's an assumption I made.
So there was only one call in relation to the 11th of December in which he said, I need some money because of a property acquisition. Is that right?
Yes, for the property, but I knew the property value, he indicated the property was close to 9 million. So I made the assumption then that the further 3 million was, again, the same property.
And what else about that property? Was it going to be a residential property for him? What did he tell you?
Yeah, he said it was a residential property.
So he was buying a home for himself.
Correct. Upgrading. I believed he lived in Blue Valley already.
Right.
So he had found another home that he wanted to acquire there.
I understand. And so when he asked for the 4 million, you assumed it was related to that. There wasn't a further conversation by the 22nd of December about the property, but there was a request for another 3 million.
Correct.
How did that request come through?
I can't recall whether it was a phone call or a message.
So by the 22nd of December, 7 million of the original 9.9 million has been moved out of Neo Solutions account, correct?
Back to Van Wyk.
Yes. Well,
an entity he
let's
purported
stop.
to have.
Okay, so Mr. Van Wyk wants to buy a property, a residential property in Blue Valley, but he doesn't want you to give the funds to him, does he?
Well, following from the reasoning, he's putting it into a company. I assume the company that he used would have been his property investment company.
Did you ask him that?
No, I didn't. I didn't ask him that. So, if I can refer you to, I must find it in your bundle now.
Are we going to your statement of this morning?
my statement from this morning.
Chair, you'll find that at 238.61.
238.61.
Correct, Chair. Thank you.
So I'm just obviously trying to pick up the numbering.
You'll find it, I think, Mr. Natterson, I'm jumping ahead of you, but I think you'll find it at 238.65 at paragraph 23.
No, I know where my.
Oh.
I'm looking for an affidavit by one of
Apologies.
my accounting team, which was submitted this morning. It's just that.
Well, if you tell Ms. Hofmeyer the name of the deponent to
the
that
affidavit from
she might help you.
Jerome Jones,
Yes, you'll find that at 238.138.
138. Okay, so Jerome Jones is an accounting staff member in our office. The main accountant of our office at that point in time was a guy named Eugene Rubin, and he was the one who had the banking account tags and did all of the accounting processing. Eugene sat alongside him doing other secretariat work and other bookkeeping. So Eugene is no longer a part of the company. He was medically boarded in around June last year, I think it was. So this affidavit is from Jerome, who was obviously in the office at the time when Van Wyk engaged with Eugene in terms of effecting the payments. So when Van Wyk called me to say he wanted the money back, he didn't specify to me there that it was not returning to Coroneko or going somewhere else. He didn't even give me the company name it was going to. So in the discussion with Eugene was when he specified that it must be paid to Batsamai's account.
So just let me get clear on that. The conversation he has with you is about Blue Valley and a
He's buying a
property he
property.
wants to purchase.
Correct.
Right. That's the end of your conversations with him on
Yes.
this topic.
Then I messaged Eugene to say Brian wants some of his money back and he must work with him.
Is that precisely what you said? Brian wants some of his money back and
Yes.
you must work with him.
Yes.
Why didn't you say, well, his contribution is 10 million and now 4 million and maybe some more is going to come out of the company?
Brian always gave the indication that there was going to be further funds that he was getting. He always led us to believe there was more money that he was going to earn and that he will always top back his to get to his investment stake.
So at the point that they start being removed from the Neo Solutions account first on the 11th of December, was your attitude, well, we're not holding them anymore for this farming venture because he's now using them for himself?
Well, it was more the fact that the farming venture was already being assessed, there was business plans created, there was a specific team appointed. So we had 4 staff members from Neo Solutions that was assisting. I even recruited a person specifically on farming internally. The other members that were there were, if the deal turned on, they would get an appointment letter with it. That's the specialist on the feedlots and the specialist on the meat distribution. But Brian was working with that team. So there was a level of comfort that he was still in the deal and that he would bring his money back.
But then the money didn't need to be there with you at that time for the deal.
Because we were still busy. As I said,
If you could just answer that, yes or no?
it didn't need to be there,
Thank you.
right? The basis was that we needed to secure offtakes first. So the core part of the business case was to engage firstly with understanding where we could secure offtakes from. And I mentioned retail chain stores. We had engagements with a few of them. And then we were looking towards getting export to China. It took us 6 to 8 months, from what I understand, to secure a meeting with the Department of Agriculture, where they established that there was a quota system in place for export to China, and therefore, and 5 companies had already been allocated their quotas, so therefore we couldn't get an opportunity to export to China. So then we shifted the focus away from export to China towards other international offtakes like Middle East, and then as well as still focused on the local offtakes. But that took a lot of time to get that part of the business case going, because it was pointless us buying a farm without having the end user in mind.
So there was no need in October or November of 2015 for you to hold 10 million rand in relation to the business venture?
Specifically for farming, there was no need to hold it for farming. But the initial discussion spoke about other ventures too.
For
we
any
just left-
reason,
Sorry.
Mr. Nuttison,
Sorry?
was there any reason for you to keep the money during that time? Was there any reason other than farming? There was
No.
farming was not
no other
a
tangible
reason.
business.
Farming
case
was not a reason for you to hold this money. Was there any other reason for
No
you to
other
hold it?
direct opportunity was mentioned. The intention was to
Yes.
get something going, but not specifics at that point.
Yeah.
And he could have kept the money himself
Correct, yes, I agree.
until such time that it was required for whatever, then he could pay it over.
Yes, I agree.
So during that time, you were holding millions of rands from Mr. Van Wyk that he had said didn't want to touch his bank account. Somebody that, from what he told you, was scared of lifestyle audits, and you kept that money.
Yes.
And somebody who is scared of lifestyle audits, shouldn't that say to you there's something wrong with this person?
Chair, as I said, his undertaking was always that the money was clean.
No. Let's talk about lifestyle audits. From what you have told me, he said to you about lifestyle audits. It seems that he was scared of a lifestyle audit being done on him by his employer. Is that not so?
Well, he made it look like it was based on the fact that he didn't want them aware of what money he was making. Maybe
Okay.
scared is, I don't know whether scared is the right word.
Yeah,
But
maybe.
he didn't want them aware.
Yeah, but he didn't want a
because of the
lifestyle
jealousy.
audit.
He mentioned jealousy, yes.
He didn't want a lifestyle audit. Is it fair to say that's what could be inferred from what he told you about lifestyle audits?
Yes, possibly.
Yeah.
Chair, sorry.
Yes.
May I just
Come forward,
make
Mr.
a comment,
Pinar.
please? Sorry, Chair, with respect, I think a bit
Yes.
much is being made of the lifestyle audit issue.
Yes.
Most people are concerned about lifestyle audits, primarily because of SARS.
Yeah, but Mr. Pinar, what's your objection?
The objection is that you've asked the same question to my client
Mr.
several
Mr.
times.
Pinar,
I don't understand
Mr.
why
Pinar,
the lifestyle audit is such an issue.
What
He's
is the
explained-
legal basis for your objection?
But the basis for my objection, Chair, is the fact that this is the 4th or 5th time that you have revisited the lifestyle audit issue and asked my client to speculate regarding...
Mr. Pinar, nobody
Yes.
has asked your client to speculate.
You have. With all due respect, you have.
Mr. Pinar, what are your submissions?
My submission is that I think we should leave the lifestyle audit issue behind because it takes the matter no further. Once again, I'm trying to understand the relevance
Mr. Pinar,
of the questioning.
is there anything else you want to say in support of your objection?
I would like to say that Mr. Van Wyk's intentions have to be explored with Mr. Van Wyk, not with my client. My client understood that there was a certain business relationship in play?
Mr. Pinar, sit down. Sit down, you are overruled. Ms. Hofmeyer, continue.
Thank you. As long as my objection was noted.
Your objection is overruled. Mr. Natterson, I'm asking you the question. A lifestyle audit is meant to see whether your lifestyle is in accordance with your means, isn't it?
Correct, according to my understanding.
And anybody whose lifestyle is in accordance with their legitimate means should have no problem with a lifestyle audit. Is that correct?
Chair, as I said, he mentioned lifestyle audits, but he didn't mention it from that he was hiding from it.
Yes, Mr. Natterson, it will help if you answer the question first, yes or no. If you want to elaborate, then you can elaborate, but let me know what the answer is first. Okay, I repeat. Do you agree that anybody whose lifestyle is in accordance with his legitimate means should have no problem with a lifestyle audit?
Agree.
But in this case, from what Mr. Van Wyk told you, is it fair to say he didn't want a lifestyle audit to be conducted on him?
I can't assume that he didn't want one. All he said to me was that he wanted the funds to be held for him.
Because one of the things he didn't want was a lifestyle audit.
Well, he
That's
used
my
the word
understanding.
jealousy of fellow employees. That's all he used was jealousy. I can't answer whether he wanted or didn't want a lifestyle audit. I'm assuming those were done as a matter of course.
Oh, what did he say about a lifestyle audit? Maybe I misunderstood.
He said that if people were aware that he's making money from private ventures in his obviously at SA, he didn't mind disclosure, but it was preferable that he didn't put it there because there's jealousy by fellow employees of the company. That's what he said.
Thank you, Ms. Hofmeyer. Continue.
Thank you, Chair. I'd then like to go to how you've described the services that Neo Solutions was going to render on this farming venture. But I have your evidence through this latest engagement to be, as at the time you received them initially, there was no need to hold them for the farming venture, correct?
Correct.
And by the time they'd left, all of them, by March of 2016, I take it they were still not required to be with you. Otherwise, you would have taken up the issue with Mr. Van Wyk, wouldn't you?
That's correct.
So in 9.9 million, out 9.9 million 4 months later, at no point in that period were the funds required to be in Neo Solutions for the purposes of the farming venture.
Not at that point, no.
Let's go to page 59 of Annexure DD 10A. You'll see at paragraph 8.6 on that page, as I understand it, you list the advisory services that Neo Solutions was going to be performing in relation to the farming venture. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You talk there about a verbal agreement between what are referred to as the shareholders there. Who are they?
The shareholders of, you're talking about the farming venture shareholders now.
Yes, you've defined
So
it
that-
as such.
So at this point in time, it would have been Van Wyk, myself, and Jose Mashele.
What point in time are we at?
So at this point, it is when the business case started to become a reality. It should have been timing-wise around middle of 2017,
Yes.
if not a little bit earlier.
Yes. That accords with some of the documents that you provided to the Commission, which we might look at in due course. Then I do have a follow-up question. Why are these services that were going to be performed in mid-2017 relevant at all to the funds you received at the end of 2015 and paid out by March of 2016?
I don't understand the question.
Okay,
Why
I'll
does the
repeat it.
services relate to the funds?
Why are services that were going to be performed by Neo Solutions in mid-2017 relevant at all to Neo Solutions' receipt of 9.9 million in November of 2015 and paid out by March of 2016?
No, I don't think that's the right picture. So Neo Solutions was conducting the feasibility anyway. We had made a decision as Neo Solutions, well, me made a decision as the shareholder of Neo to look at creating a new business in any event. Whether Mr. Van Wyk or not came along for the ride. When he got wind of those discussions, he asked to be part of the project at that point. So Neo Solutions was always going to look at the farming venture, irrespective of Mr. Van Wyk's existence or not.
When did he ask to be part of the venture?
That's in October, towards the end of October 2015, as we were discussing it. So our modus operandi is Neo Solutions would perform these advisory services, irrespective, right? Then when the business unit is created, Neo Solutions would get its success fee, which will then be paid back to itself for managing, incubating this business, as well as get contracts for support services, technology, and so on going forward. That's how I normally do it.
Ms. Nassen, then you'll just have to help me about paragraph 8.6.
Okay?
Paragraph 8.6 talks about, I understand it, the services that Neo Solutions was going to perform in relation to this farming venture, correct?
Correct.
And you say those services were to be performed from mid-2017,
No,
correct?
the services had commenced earlier anyway, but the fact that when more shareholders came on, like Brian and Jose, there was agreement that there would be a success fee paid to Neo Solutions once the enterprise got turned on.
So the agreement referred to here is an agreement in mid-2017.
The agreement when there were other shareholders at the table. However, there was always a condition from the start that if the venture became successful and got turned on, that Neo Solutions would be entitled to a success fee, even if I was the sole shareholder of the business going forward, of the farming venture going forward.
Ms. Nassen, we've moved to success fees in a circumstance where I understand the original explanation was about Mr. Van Wyk's pro rata contribution to the farming venture. Didn't have anything to do with success fees unless I've misunderstood your evidence.
Well, maybe I'm misunderstanding your question then, because I thought we talked about how Neo Solutions is going to be remunerated for its role in getting the project going.
Let me be absolutely precise so we don't miss each other. How is Neo Solutions going to be remunerated for the services that are listed at paragraph 8.6 on the page?
So on successful execution of creating the farming venture, there would be a success fee billed to the farming venture from Neo Solutions to remunerate it for its services performed.
But as a matter of fact, I have your evidence to be those services, as are generally described here, let's go through them. Necessary initial investigations into the feasibility, engagement with third-party stakeholders about owners of required farmsteads, attending to preparation of necessary plans for the foundation and establishment of the farming venture, and other advisory, consultancy,
Correct.
and ancillary services. Had those commenced earlier?
The services commenced, but we weren't entitled to invoice or bill for anything until we got to a successful conclusion of a transaction.
And that was going to be around mid-2017, had it come to
Had it
fruition?
come to fruition, yes.
So there was going to be services throughout for which Neo Solutions would not be remunerated.
No, not the other way. Okay. Their staff, our business is in the business of selling time. So there's timesheets from all the people that are involved with doing work. So we then create a project code for the time relating to the investment into a particular project. That sits in a work in progress. So when we either land a project or we secure a business transaction, then the success fee will be significantly more than us having invoiced the client just for time and profit. So it was a success fee driven assignment, like I've done with many others. It's like corporate finance business. A lot of deals get done where the entity advising the transaction would only earn a success fee as a percentage of the transaction. But they would incur costs along the way, which they carry on their own books. So I'd structured it in exactly the same way.
So I think what might help us, Mr. Nassen, is something you said earlier in your testimony a few moments ago. As I have it, you said something like, if the farming venture was to happen, Mr. Van Wyk wanted to participate in it. Is that a fair reflection of what he was saying in October 2015?
No, if...
Because at that point, just to follow up, in fairness to you, Mr. Natterson, there wasn't a farming venture yet, was there?
No, there was a vision of creating one. Let's call it that. There was a bit of work done on supply chain and logistics of what would be required to be able to service and give effect to it. And then we were at that point starting to understand what is the cost or what size of farming operation would be required to service this kind of operation. That's where we were in October 2015.
So,
The fleshing out of that, we had indicative workings to get to the 100 million, but there was obviously a lot of fleshing out that had to happen, as well as securing offtakes to make the deal work.
Ms. Nathan, I must say that explanation does then accord with your lack of follow-up when Mr. Van Wyk kept directing you to disperse these funds to various entities. Because at that point, it was only if the farming venture came to bear fruit that he would be making a contribution. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes. So
At the
let's-
time when a loan was approved is when our equity contribution needs to be raised. So if that was intended to be around June of 2017 or even a little bit later, because we lost time on the China issue, then so be it. But the intention was that his funds was technically only needed at the point when we had the loan approval to be able to then reflect equal the equity on our side.
So between November of 2015 and March of 2016, you were just holding his money for him because he didn't want it to sit in his bank account.
Well, the intention was always to put it into the investment at some point. So
But, Ms. Nathan, you had no difficulty with him depleting all of those funds by March of 2016, correct?
when the transaction wasn't running as smoothly or as quickly as I thought it would, then we had, obviously, then when he asked for his money, I felt it was his, and I returned it.
Because at that stage, Neo Solutions had no claim on it, did they?
That's right.
That's actually what your, I think it's your accountant said, as I have it from his affidavit. Said it's Van Wyk's funds, so he must get them back when he wants them. Correct. Let's talk about what he was told. He was told to pay them to Batsamai Investment Holdings. Were you aware of that at the time?
No, not at the time.
Did you follow up with your accountant as to where those funds were going to be paid?
No, I didn't.
Why not?
Not at the time. I just got confirmation that he had given Brian his money.
And in your mind, did that mean he paid them back into Brian's account? Was that your
I assumed
assumption?
it went back to Brian's account.
Would you have been surprised if you'd heard it had been directed to some entity called Batsamai Investment Holdings?
I only found out it was paid to Batsamai when Udil approached me.
So we're now in September of 2017.
That's right.
So you were relying on Mr. Van Wyk's word at this point. He'd called you. He said he wants to buy a property in Blue Valley, and you got him to contact your accountant about getting his money back to him. Is that a fair summary?
That's right.
And you made no inquiries as a matter of fact, to whom those funds were going to be paid?
No, I didn't at the time, no.
And nothing about the previous dealings with him, where he was worried about lifestyle audits and the money not hitting his bank account? Did that not give you caution to make sure to whom the monies were going to be paid?
It was his money. So I took the view, I actually at that point thought it went back to him personally. I didn't know it was going to what he purported to the accountant was a property holding company.
Mr. Natson, if that had been your thought, did you follow up with Mr. Van Wyk why his position had moved from November of 2015, when he didn't want it to hit his account, to a new position a month later where he was happy for it to hit his account?
I was away on a project. I didn't even think to ask it.
Well, Mr. Natterson, you say you thought that the money was going into his account.
No, Chair, I didn't think to ask any question around it. All we knew was he wanted his portion back urgently, and that I said, that's fine, it's your money, you can take it back.
Yes, no. Did I understand you correctly that you just said you thought the money was going to go into his account? That's what I want to check first.
Yeah, I'm not sure which account it would have gone to. All I said, reimburse his money.
Mr. Natterson. All I am doing at this stage is trying to understand whether I heard you correctly. So my question is whether a few minutes ago you said you thought the money was going to go into his bank account. That's what I want. Did you say that a few minutes ago, or did you not say that?
No, maybe I thought it was his own account. I'm not sure. The point is, I only knew that he requested his money for an urgent acquisition of a property, and I said, go ahead. I didn't think as to which account. At that point in time, it didn't cross my mind.
Yes, okay, let me repeat again. Is my understanding correct that a few minutes ago you said you thought the money was going to go into his account? Did I understand you correctly?
I'm not sure.
Or you can't remember?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Ms. Hoffman, I don't know whether you might have heard anything along the lines that I'm saying.
I certainly heard it in the same way, Chair.
In the same way?
Yes.
How fast can we have a rewind? It can't be too far back.
Can't be too far back.
Yeah.
We could maybe adjourn for 5 minutes. And
Chair,
we
I'll
could-
concede if I
Yes.
said that he's going to his own account.
Yes.
My understanding was it was his money. I didn't think whether it's going to his personal account or anything else. All I said was, it's your money, you can have it back. Right?
Yes.
So if I did say his own account now, that's an error.
Please,
I didn't think it would go to his personal account.
Okay, please repeat that. I don't want to misunderstand anything.
There's
Yeah.
There's
the
no
last part.
At that point in time, when he requested his funds, all I said was, it is your money, you can have it back. I did not contemplate at the time whether it goes to his personal account or back to Coroneka or any other account. Because at that point, I wasn't even aware of a dispute he was having at Coroneka. So in my mind, it might have even gone back there.
But based on what he had told you before, that he didn't want the money to touch his bank account, isn't the position that you couldn't therefore have thought that
Yeah.
the money was going to be paid to his account? Because then
personal
that
account.
would be touching his account.
It would be to an entity under his control, but not to his personal account.
Yes. But shouldn't that have heightened your suspicion about this money that never goes into the accounts of this person, even after, is it about a month after you received it, he wants it, but it won't go into his account. It's got to go somewhere else.
Chair, in the context of it, there were previous discussions where he spoke about wanting to upgrade his home. So when he phoned me, it was on the basis of upgrading his home. So I didn't think that it was any issue with it because it correlated with previous discussions that he wanted the money to acquire that property.
Or is it later where he wanted a certain amount in cash?
Yeah, that's later.
That's later.
That's later.
Okay.
Chair, we'll get to that in due course. If I may, just one or two follow-up questions. Mr. Natterson, he is indicating to you at the early, 11th of December 2015 that he wants the funds back for a purchase of a property, correct?
Yes.
At that stage, you don't make inquiries, as I have it, as to whom the funds are in fact going to be paid, correct?
I didn't at the time, no.
Is that not something that you should have been aware of, given that these are transactions taking place in your company, which are going to have to be accounted for in due course?
So with the way my accountant had posted the transaction, it was sitting in a loan account. Yes, incorrectly so, it was sitting in my shareholder loan account. It should have been in a suspense account. But to me, there was 9.9 million sitting in a suspense account of some sort, currently my loan account. When he requested funds, it was then drawn off that to return to him. That's how I saw it from where I was sitting. But my accountant obviously processed the payment because when I authorized him to go ahead, he then processed the payment under Brian's direction.
Ms. Natterson, let me just be clear. I know we're talking about what accounting entry it was given, and you seem to have made a concession that it shouldn't have been entered against your loan account. We'll come back to that. I'm interested in whether it's relevant for you to know, as the sole director shareholder of Neo Solutions, as well as the person who signed off on the financial statements relevant to this period, that you need to know to whom funds are paid by Neo Solutions.
Well, my understanding was it was paid to Brian's company, or to Brian.
No, sorry, Mr. Natterson, I understand your previous evidence to have been you made no inquiries as to the identity of the person to whom it was paid. Did I understand that evidence incorrectly?
No, I did say that. I said Brian worked with my accountant to give him the details of where to pay it to.
So you yourself, Mr. Natterson, made no inquiries as to what entity or person those funds were paid?
I didn't myself ask my accountant where was it paid to. No.
Because as I understand your earlier evidence, you only discovered it was paid to this entity, Batsama Investment Holdings, much later.
That's right.
Mr. Natterson, as I have one of your previous versions, I'll just have to remind myself as to which it is. You indicated that Mr. van Wyk had told you that he owned Batsama Investment Holdings. Do you remember having given that version?
I don't recall, but I think it might be there.
So how did that conversation come about if you only heard about Batsama Investment Holdings in September 2017?
No, that's not correct. I didn't know about Batsama until Judeel brought it to my attention.
So there hadn't then been a discussion with Mr. van Wyk in which he said he is the owner of Batsama Investment Holdings?
No.
Mr. van Wyk, if we can then go...
Natterson.
Apology, I do that. Chair, I do it
It's
regularly.
not the first time you do it.
I do apologize, and it generally happens at around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. There's actually some consistency.
I think I'll allow the witnesses to fine you now if you do that.
They must. Mr. Natterson, I do apologize, and if I do it again, it's a standing apology. Right, Mr. Natterson, let's then go to the financial treatment of this receipt of funds and disbursement of funds. As I have it, you are involved in preparing the financial statements of Neo Solutions. Is that correct?
No, not me. Not
You're
me
not?
personally.
No. Who does it?
At that point in time, it was Eugene Rubin.
Right. So let's go in DD 10, if we may, A, to page 205. Well, actually, let's start a few pages earlier at the commencement of the annual financial statements at page 201. Chair, if you may give me one moment.
Yes.
Okay. Are these the financial statements of Neo Solutions for the year ended 29 February 2016?
Have you found the right page, Mr.
I'm on
Nelson?
page 201.
Yes, I'm just asking if the documents that then follow are the 29 February 2016 annual financial
That's right.
statements of Neo Solutions.
Yes.
And if we go over to page 205, is that your signature on that page?
Yes.
What does your signature signify on that page?
It's a director's responsibility and approval.
Right, so let's start at the first paragraph. It reads, as I have it, the director is required by the Companies Act of South Africa to maintain adequate accounting records and is responsible for the content and integrity of the annual financial statements and related financial information included in this report. Do you see that?
Yes.
It is his responsibility to ensure that the annual financial statements fairly present the state of affairs of the company as at the end of the financial year and the results of its operations and cash flows for the year then ended, in conformity with South African statements of generally accepted accounting practice. Do you see that?
That's right.
Is it fair then to read your signature at the end of the page to mean you are the director who has given that confirmation?
That's right.
And amongst those confirmations is that the financial statements fairly present the state of affairs of the company at the end of the financial year, correct?
That's right.
So just to return to the previous question, when I said that you were responsible for them, I understood your answer to be no. Is that right?
No, you said responsible for preparing.
Apologies. So the preparation was done by someone within your company, correct?
That's right.
But you would not have signed this page unless you'd satisfied yourself as to their accuracy, correct?
At this point, yes.
What does at this?
Yes.
Thank you. Just before we leave this page, can I ask about the conformity with the South African statements of generally accepted accounting practice in that first paragraph? Why did you refer to them?
I think that's the standard, it's a standard template document
Yes.
for financial.
And can I just confirm, when did you sign this page?
It's undated, so I can't recall when.
You might just see above your signature, there's a date in that line.
11th of August,
And what year?
2016.
Are you aware that the South African statements of generally accepted accounting practice were not applicable in August of 2016?
Well, as I said, it was a template that we signed off.
My question,
It
Mr.
should be
Natterson,
IFRS.
is are you aware that they were not applicable
No.
in August of 2016?
I don't recall when they were changed, but yes, I'll concede it.
So when you signed this, you didn't satisfy yourself as to the standard that had been used in order to prepare these financial statements.
No, not at the time.
Do you know that that is a requirement of a chartered accountant in business?
Yeah, so can I explain how these evolved? So the accounting team would prepare our pack at year end. Then that would be captured into pastel, and then they would import them into templates and then take them across to the accountants and auditors, and then they would be checking them and finalizing the preparations and bringing it back to me. So these templates actually come from the accounting firm that we had appointed to prepare the financials with us. So it was brought to me, yes, I signed it, and I'm accountable for that signature, but to answer your question directly, I didn't apply my mind to whether GAAP or a new standard was being applied.
Was that not something you should have been concerned about? Because the standards against which annual financial statements are being prepared is fairly relevant, isn't it?
Yes, but we had obviously appointed a firm to do that for us, so I rely on the fact that they've done their homework on it.
So you weren't aware that GAAP, as you call it, was no longer operational from the 1st of December 2013?
Well, I didn't check it. It was an oversight by me.
Did you know at the time that you signed this that GAAP was no longer applicable
I did know,
as from
but-
the 1st of December 2013?
I did know, but it was an oversight.
Thank you. I'd then like to move within this document, Mr. Natterson, to a few of its entries. But before we get there, I'm interested in something that you said earlier in relation to the accounting treatment of these funds of 9.9 million. Mr. Natterson, your previous testimony was that this was a part contribution to a farming venture that Mr. Van Wyk was going to enter into with you. Is that correct?
Yes.
And for which Neo Solutions was going to be rendering certain services, correct?
If the venture was successful, we would be remunerated. We were rendering services anyway. But if the venture was successful in turning on, then we would be remunerated for it.
And if this money had then been paid into Neo Solutions for services that it was going to render, it would have qualified as revenue, would it not?
The services we're performing, yes.
Let me be clear again, just so we're not at cross purposes. If 9.9 million had been paid into Neo Solutions for services it was going to render in relation to the farming venture, that would have constituted revenue in the hands of Neo Solutions.
No.
Why not?
The 9.9 million would have been his capital contribution to his shareholding of the business. The invoice that would have gone would have been from Neo Solutions to the new business, Dista, once it's established, for services rendered. So there are two separate lines. The monies received from Van Wyk was not revenue. The monies received from Van Wyk was capital that would have gone into his shareholder.
Yes, Mr. Nasson, but then why not just ask him to keep them and put it into the new entity when that all
Yes, that
took
could
off?
have happened. I agree. With what we know today is what ought to have happened.
But then I
But-
don't understand why it has to come through Neo Solutions at all.
It was, okay, Neo Solutions is my alter ego. You've asked me a few times now, why didn't I receive the funds? Now, I wouldn't, in my mind, Neo Solutions is my transacting entity. It's the one running with the business case to create this enterprise. To receive the monies and implement the enterprise as it happened, it's the entity that would have done it. It wouldn't have been Vivian holding Brian's funds and then transferring it into his shareholding. That thought never crossed my mind to move it to myself. But I disagree with you that this is revenue to Neo Solutions. It is not revenue. It can only become revenue when there's a successful transaction that Neo Solutions would have been entitled to invoice the entity, Dista, for the services rendered in incubating it.
Ms. Nathan, I don't think we're at cross purposes. My question was if the funds had been received by Neo Solutions for services it was rendering in relation to the farming activities, it would have constituted revenue in the hands of Neo Solutions. Your answer, as I understand it, talks about what was actually going to happen, but if we can just focus on my question. If it is money being paid to Neo Solutions for services that Neo Solutions is rendering, then it is revenue, correct?
But we were not rendering the services to
No,
the
that's-
country.
Hang on, Mr. Natterson. Okay, take it easy. I think your answer to her question has to be yes. Because you made the point earlier, a few minutes ago, that it would only be revenue after services had been rendered, if I understood you correctly. That's the same question she's putting. She's saying, if that money, if Neo Solutions received that money for services it was rendering, that would have been revenue. So rendering
Are you referring
already, or services it had rendered already, or was rendering, continuing to render. That's what she's talking about. And my understanding is that your answer is likely to be yes.
Chair, maybe I'm still missing the point.
Yes.
Are we referring to the 9.9 million?
She's referring to that.
But the 9.9 million was never received for services rendered.
No,
It was
she
never
understands that. She said if. She said if it was received in respect of services that Neo Solutions was rendering.
Oh, yes. Okay. If it was received with the objective of it being for the services, then yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Nathan, if you go to page 157 in Exhibit DD10A, do you see that page?
Mhm.
Do you see about maybe a quarter of the way down, there's an entry against the side that says on WED March 20th, 2019 at 6:17 a.m. And then in inverted commas it says Vivian Natterson. And then your email address wrote. Do you see that?
That's right.
Is
I'm
this-
sorry, I'm at 157. Is that where you are?
Yes, I am, Chair. It's about maybe more like an eighth of the way down in bold towards the left-hand side. You'll see the words on. The first email ends with Outlook for iOS. Do you see that in blue, Chair? Towards the top.
It's about
In
the fifth
blue.
line.
Oh, apologies. Do you only have a black and white version? That's not acceptable. Chair?
Well,
if I-
well, there is the name Viv at the end of the email.
yes, if you
Must-
go up to the top of the email. I'm just trying to orientate.
on Wednesday. Okay,
Yes.
now I can see. Okay,
Thank you,
thank
Chair.
you.
Do you see that email, Mr. Natterson?
Yes.
Do you confirm that this is an email you sent to Mr. Madlala
Yes.
on that date?
Yes.
If we go to paragraph 2 there, I'm drawing your attention to this because, as I have it, it's very consistent with what you've just said in testimony. You say, this is the 20th of March. Chair, just to orientate ourselves, Mr. Natterson had had his first meeting with the Commission on the 15th of March, where the recording was made, and now this is an email on the 20th of March, as I have it.
That's
The
right.
second paragraph says, this serves to confirm our discussion, where I confirm to you that we did not have invoices to and from Neo Solutions and Coronacre and Batsamai, as the case may be, for the flow of funds. When Van Wyk had engaged with us, with our accounting team, they all agreed to use the loan account, as this was not for services rendered by us, but was in fact a distribution of his share of return, in effect his dividend. Do you see that?
That's correct.
Is that your evidence today?
Yes, it was then and it is today.
Thank you. So any discussion of the services that Neo Solutions was going to render in relation to this farming venture is irrelevant to these funds that you received from Mr. Van Wyk, correct?
Correct.
Despite the reference that is placed on it in your affidavit of the 13th of June and your statement of this morning.
No, it's not inconsistent with that. My evidence has always been Neo Solutions was incubating the business case. And it was building up its costs along that. So there were times when there were travel costs incurred. I was paying the salaries of the contractor that was appointed to assist in creating the business case. There were costs being incurred by us, but it's in our books as a work in progress. And we would only ever invoice for the services rendered as a success fee to the entity Dista. We were never going to invoice Van Wyk for the services rendered relating to the farming venture.
So as between November 2015 and March 2016, the services that Neo Solutions may have been rendering or otherwise in the farming venture has no relevance to the treatment of the funds that you received from Mr. Van Wyk or paid out on his instruction, correct?
Yes.
Let's go back to the financials then, if we may. We were at page 205. And as I have it, you've indicated your signature on that page indicates your confirmation that these statements fairly present the state of affairs of the company as at the end of the financial year. And here we're talking about February 2016, correct?
That's right.
Thank you. You are going to have to assist me a little bit, if you don't mind, with these financials. We're going to rely on your expertise for that purpose, if we may, as a chartered accountant. If we could go over to page 207. But what document is this?
That's the balance sheet.
And can you just tell us, there seem to be two columns on the right-hand side. There's one headed 2015 and there's one headed 2016. Do you see that?
That's right.
What does the column headed 2015 reflect?
I don't understand. You
Well,
mean that's the balance sheet values for that year, that financial year?
Right, so this will show us what the financial position of the business was at the end of February 2015, is that right?
That's right.
And would it then accord with whatever the financials for 2015 had reflected?
Yes.
So you could almost line them up side by side and they would be the same, is that right?
Repeat the question.
So if we went and got the 2015 financials and we
Yes.
opened up,
The closing balances should reconcile to the opening balances, yeah.
well,
Yeah.
no, the line items.
Yeah.
All of the line items, because as I understand the right-hand column, it's just helping the reader to see what the financial position was at the year end of the prior financial year, correct?
Yes.
And so that should be a reflection of what those financials had contained for this page, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Then the other line item I'm interested in on this page is the line item just before the heading total assets.
Mhm.
You'll see there's a line item that says cash and cash equivalents. Do you see that?
Yes.
What is that?
That should be the bank balances.
So is that money in the bank as at the end of February 2016?
Yes.
So the amount we have there is 384,168 Rand, correct?
Yes, but we operate in an overdraft. So there should be an amount under liabilities.
Well, if you go down to bank overdraft, there's a nil there.
Hmm.
Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay, so just so I can understand, the bank overdraft is at nil, so cash and cash equivalents is reflecting that in the bank account of Neo Solutions as at the end of February 2016, there was 384,168 Rand, correct?
Yeah, but this doesn't appear to be right now.
Pardon?
This doesn't appear to be right now. There should have been an overdraft amount. Okay, carry on with your question.
Are you concerned that 384,168 Rand doesn't reflect the position in the bank accounts of Neo Solutions as at February
No,
2016?
that doesn't look right. That looks wrong.
So this is incorrect.
That is incorrect.
What was it?
I don't have the exact number here.
Give
but
me a
that-
sense.
In terms of, no, I have no idea actually what it should be at that.
How do you know it's wrong then?
It doesn't look right from the understanding of the business.
So there should have been more in the overdraft.
They should have been, yeah, more in the overdraft.
So that number of cash and cash equivalents should be lower.
Yes. And then the overdraft should be there, but we have obviously higher limits on that.
Okay, so as I understand your evidence now, there's some error on this page. You can't tell me precisely what it is, but the upshot of it is that what's worrying you is that cash and cash equivalents line should be lower than it currently is reflected, correct?
Yes, and then the overdraft balance is reflected there.
Yes. Okay, let's work with that, Ms. Nasson, if we may. I'll come back to it in a moment. Let's just go over to page 208.
That's the income statement.
Thank you. So this is an income statement. Just tell me at the bottom of the line of 2016, do you see that there's taxation indicated there?
Yes.
Is that the tax that Neo Solutions paid on that day? Sorry, for that year.
There would be a tax recon, but it should be in that region, yes.
Yeah, actually we can find the tax recon, I think. Let me just see where I made a note of it. Oh, no, we have to go to later financials for the tax recon. But that is indicative, can we leave it at that, on page 208,
Okay.
of the tax liability of Neo Solutions for the year ending 2016. Is that right?
Yes.
We'll go to the actual recon in a moment. Let's go over to page 210, if we may.
Yeah.
There's a topic there, 8, taxation. Do you see that?
Yes.
And then the second line item there is non-deductible expenses donations. Do you see that?
Yes.
What were those donations for or related to?
I can't recall. It's 2016. It would have been around 2015 sometime.
You would still have accounting records for that, would you not?
We should do, yeah.
Yes, the obligation is to keep them for 5 years, correct?
Yeah.
So if we wanted to explore with you what those donations were for, you'd be able to provide those records.
We'll be able to unpack them. Yes.
You are aware, are you not, that a summons which required you to produce documents today included, amongst other things, these types of items? Is that correct?
That's right.
Those documents haven't yet been provided to the Commission, correct?
I think, I don't know if I can deal with that now, maybe,
Sure.
if it'll help.
Yes.
So, Chair, when we got the request for this information, then I obviously got it onto our accounting team to look at. Then we started to assemble the documents, and somewhere between us and the accounting firm, we were unable to trace a lot of the electronic version of the record. So although the hard copies are all there, what we found after the auditors or the accounting firm got the summons, we had a meeting on Wednesday. And on Wednesday, it transpired that there was a discrepancy between the sets of financials, which we then said in that meeting, we needed to then work towards reconciling so that we could provide an accurate set of financials. There were clearly discrepancies between the two sets. So I then requested the audit team or the accounting firm team to come in and assist us. The next morning, they elected to resign as our auditors and then to highlight the discrepancies to the Commission. Although we are now requiring the information that they are sitting with on their side, but ultimately we do have all the hard copy supporting documents. After that meeting that we had with the accounting firm on Wednesday, we went back to our accounting unit, and in there, on Pastel, the 2015-2016 accounting information that was captured was overwritten by the 2016-17 information. So we then started the process of recapturing. And then I was requesting from the accountants, do they have a trial balance that they use to help prepare the pack, which is at that point they had told us they're not engaging with us anymore. So we do need to reconstruct, and if the Commission would bear with us, we will reconstruct that information and provide it across to you with accurate financial information. But we were only made aware of the discrepancies when the accounting firm pointed out that the financials that were out, that we handed over to you, were actually, in fact, there were discrepancies with it. But we do wish to reconcile it and provide you with an updated set.
Ms. Nashson, as I understand Mr. Patel's affidavit, he takes no issue with the 2016 financials,
Yes.
which are the ones we're working on, correct?
Yes, but I think the situation exists that we need to...
No. My question is, he does not take issue
He
with the
doesn't take issue with
2016
it.
financial statements, correct?
Correct.
So we're in the 2016 financial statements at page 210 of Exhibit DD10, and I've asked about documents that will give us greater insight as to the donation on that page,
Okay.
correct? And as I understand your evidence, you say you have hard copies of all of this in the possession of Neo Solutions.
Yes, they should be there.
So why have those not been provided?
Well, we were intending to obviously use, you requested the general ledgers and the trial balances. So we needed to reconstruct that. So that's why we kept the information with us in order to produce this.
Sorry, just help me with what had to be reconstructed. You said you have all the hard copy records.
We've got hard copies, but in terms of the information on our platform, on Pastel, we found that when Eugene did the rollover into 2017, he did not do a closeout of 2016's financials. So then when he captured information, it overwrote our 2015, 2016 information. So we needed to obviously reconstruct that and then provide it.
Sorry, so the reconstruction relates to some electronic repository of this information, correct?
The general ledger.
Yes, but I thought you said you had hard copies of everything.
We do have hard copies, yes.
So those could be provided?
Those can be provided, yes.
Yes. Will they be provided?
Yes.
Thank you.
Chair, sorry, I'm going to object at this point again because I just don't understand the relevance of donations, taxation, the allegation around state
Come
capture.
forward, Mr. Pinar.
Chair, the allegation again around state capture in this matter relates solely to the 9.9 that flowed into Neo Solutions account from Coroneka and that was paid out to Batsamai. What my client's financial statements have to do with anything is incomprehensible to me. If my learned colleague could maybe just explain where this line of questioning is going, because once again, we are dealing with, donations. What has the line item for donations got to do with the 9.9 million rand that was received and paid out?
I understand where the questions completely, Mr. Pinar. I think they are very relevant. And I think your client appreciates their relevance. That's why he's being very helpful to say he'll provide them. He doesn't have any problem.
Well, before he provides them, because I'm the one giving legal advice, I'm not so sure that they're relevant.
Well, if he wants to provide them, are you going to say he should not provide them?
I might say that, yes. And I might ask the Commission's legal representatives to explain the relevance.
Have you got anything else that you want to say about your objection?
Is my objection overruled?
Yeah, it is overruled.
Once again.
Sit down, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Noted.
Chair, my legal representative's advice, again, I think I understand where he's coming from. We have currently, and it's a matter of record already from Tlatsana's testimony, that the funds that we had received, we have paid out to Batsamai. So I think my legal advisor is guiding me in that, yes, maybe it is important to understand the relevance then of these further questions. Yeah, we're happy to cooperate if the reasons given are adequate.
Well, I've ruled that the questions that Ms. Hofmeyer asked you is relevant. You have answered it. If after this you change your mind about providing the documentation, you must communicate that, and that position will then be dealt with in the light of whatever you will communicate.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Nashton. If we can then go back to page 208. On 208, there's a line item under expenses there of accounting and audit fees. Do you see that?
Yes?
Is that the line item related to Mr. Patel's services?
I'm assuming so, yes.
You assume, do you know that as a fact, or is it an assumption you make?
The exact amount, I don't know.
No,
Yeah.
my question was,
The line item would relate to him, yes.
did you have any other accountants that you were utilizing for the purposes of the business?
Not for the books preparation, but generally, yes.
What does generally mean?
So there could be obviously any other support fees. Sometimes we hire in ad hoc people to do captures and so on. So it would have been posted to that same line item.
Right. And it says, and audit fees. Were your financial statements audited?
No. It's a compilation engagement.
Right. So audit fees there is not accurate.
No.
So it should just be accounting fees. Is that right?
That's right.
For the year ended.
Accounting and support fees.
And support fees. And you said some of it was provided by Mr. Patel. Were there other accountants providing the support
Not
fees?
accounting firms. They would be, if we had to hire anybody to do any capture work, etc., then those costs of those contractors or for capturing would be in that line item.
As a matter of fact, at the end of 2016, do you recall if there were those other services being provided?
I don't recall.
Thank you. Then, if we can go just to the financial position of NAO Solutions at the end of 2016, right? Specifically in relation to the 9.9 million. Okay, as I have it, 9.9 million comes into the NAO Solutions account in November 2015, correct?
Yes.
In December 2015, pursuant to 2 tranches, 7 million is paid out, correct?
Yes.
There is a further 300,000, Chair, we will come back to the 300,000 cash, paid out in January 2016, correct?
That's right.
So that is a total of 7.3 million paid out by the end of February 2016, correct?
That's right.
Which leaves a balance of 2.6 million of the 9.9 million that was received in the previous year in November, correct?
Yes.
I understood your evidence earlier in relation to your Section 204 declaration to be that NAO Solutions made no use whatever of those funds. Is that correct?
We did not utilize the funds. It was held for him.
Thank you. Let's go back to the page that reflects the cash and cash equivalents on page 207, if we may. Mr. Natterson, I understand your evidence to be you made no use whatsoever of the 9.9 million that was received from Mr. Van Wyk, correct?
Yes.
You held the funds for him, correct?
Yes.
So at the year ending February 2016, there should have been at least 2.6 million sitting in the bank of NAO
That's why I'm
Solutions,
saying
correct?
the number looks wrong.
No, Mr. Natterson, the reason you said the number looks wrong is because that figure was too high.
Chair, I think my client has already said that there are issues with the financial statements.
Yes, your client is able to answer that. He has just said something. Let's hear him.
So my statement was that that number looks wrong because it's sitting under cash and cash equivalents. There should have been an overdraft where we have facilities. We do not utilize our full overdraft. So that number of 300 looks wrong in that line item. But there should have been a bank overdraft and the facility sits there where we can draw from those facilities at any point in time. So that's why I'm saying that these look wrong.
Mr. Natterson, just to be clear about your evidence, because I took great care to understand from you in what respect it was wrong. Was your previous evidence that that line item under cash and cash equivalents was wrong because it was too big, too high? It needed
No.
to be lower?
No, what I said was the number on the 384 that you pointed out in cash equivalents at the top doesn't look right from the start. That there should have been a balance on the overdraft and we have a facility. So if Mr. Van Wyk arrived tomorrow, during this financial year and asked for his further cash back, it would have been drawn from our facility and given back to him.
Well, Mr. Natterson, just reflect properly in terms of what you said. My understanding too was that you said what was wrong about that amount was that it was too high. That's my understanding, which
In the
coincides
context that
with...
the number should not
Hang
be...
on. That's my understanding, which seems to coincide with Ms. Hofmeer's understanding. So, but we must just get that right. Did you say that, or are you saying you did not say that?
I said it looks high because the number should be 0 there.
Okay. Ms. Hofmeer?
Thank you, Chair. It seems to me there'll be a simple way to resolve this. We'll just go to the bank statements of Neo Solutions for the year ending February 2016,
That's right.
and we'll be able to assess what the financial position was.
From the overdraft facilities,
Indeed.
correct.
So let's work on a hypothetical now. Mr. Natterson, if those bank statements reflect that there is, that the 2.6 million, that's the difference between what was received in November and paid out by the end of February 2016, does not show available funds of 2.6 million, then these statements incorrectly reflect the financial position.
Correct. That would be
And
the
moreover, then that 2.6 million had been utilized by Neo Solutions in the period before the end of February 2016.
We'll check that, but
No, the
in
question
the theory,
is if
yes. In theory, yes.
they would have been utilized then within the business.
I think you are nodding. That means yes.
Sorry
I
for
said
the
in
record.
theory, yes.
Okay.
Apologies,
Thank
we
you,
just
thank
sometimes
you.
need
Sorry,
to...
Chair, can we
get
just
it on
take that
record.
one step further? If the
Yes.
monies had been utilized as part of the business, that means what? Sorry.
Mr. Pinar, we need to have a smooth running of the hearing. Quite frankly, a lot of the objections that you have been making really don't assist in any way. This witness is able to deal with matters very well. I've observed that. He is dealing with matters and he gives answers. Allow Ms. Hofmeyer to proceed with her questioning. There isn't anything wrong with the question that she put forward. Wait, maybe later on you will understand what it is that she was driving to.
Chair, I'm the legal representative for Mr. Natterson. He's entitled to legal representation, yes? Yes?
Mr. Pinar.
Is Mr. Natterson entitled to legal representation?
Mr. Pinar, have you got any other objection?
It's not an objection. I would like an
Sorry?
explanation. It's not an objection. I would like an explanation.
Mr.
A submission
Pinar,
has been made. A submission has been made that the monies were utilized by Neo Solutions. If the monies were utilized by Neo Solutions, it's because
Wait,
the
Mr.
monies were
Pinar,
held in Neo Solutions
I will
banking
allow
account.
you to re-examine if you want to.
I'm
I
not
will allow
examining.
you that.
I'm making a put
No,
to
wait
Ms.
for your turn. I will allow you to clarify that with your client later on in re-examination.
How am I to clarify it with my client if I'm not even certain as
Mr.
to why
Pinar,
Ms. Hofmeyer has
your
asked the
objection
question?
is overruled. Ms. Hofmeyer, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Natterson, sorry, I've just lost my file. The accounting treatment that was given in these 2016 financial statements to the 9.9 million was that they were reflected as a loan from directors or shareholders, correct?
Yes.
So we'll find that, as I understand it, at page 207.
In the shareholders' loan.
In the shareholders' loan, correct. Let's just find that on the page. It's under the section indicating liabilities. Do you see that?
Yes.
And there's a line item there.
I'm sorry, what page are you now on?
Apologies, Chair. We're at 207.
Oh, okay.
We are
I'm
back in the financial statements ending February 2016.
Okay, I've got that.
Oh, Mr. Nasson, just, sorry, before I get there, you mentioned earlier that there had been a loan application in relation to the farming venture. Is that right?
Well, I don't think we got to the final loan application, but we prepared the business case and we did valuations with Nedbank, which I've submitted in my revised application, revised document of today. But a formal loan application hadn't been submitted at the time.
So the financials that we're looking at now, were they ever submitted for the purposes of a loan application?
I don't think they were.
And for any other loan applications of the business?
I'm not sure. I don't think so.
Could you come back to us on that if we needed it?
Yes.
Thank you. Right, so we're now on page 207, and you'll see a bold heading sort of middle of the page that says liabilities. Do you see that?
Yes.
And then below that, non-current liabilities, and then the line item after that is loans from shareholders / other parties.
Right.
Do you see that?
Yes.
And that's in an amount of about 65 million, correct?
Yes.
So I understand from your evidence, a portion of that is the 9.9 million received from Mr. Van Wyk through Coroneka. Is that correct?
Yes.
And-
In my line item of the Vivian Natterson shareholder loan.
Yes, because if you go to the notes, I think that's made clear. Let's just go there. Yes, if you go to 214, remember there was a note 5 on
Yes.
that page we were looking at, so then we go further in the financial statements as I understand them to page 214, and under item 5 there it says loan from directors, shareholders or other parties, and what you've indicated there is V. Natterson.
Yes.
These loans bear no interest and has no fixed terms of payment, correct?
That's correct.
So it identifies that it is a loan from you to the company, correct? Mr. Natterson, why reflect monies you'd received from a third party into Neo Solutions to be taken out at his instruction as a loan from you to the company?
As I said, there was an oversight by my accountant. He should have put it to a separate suspense account.
You did sign off on these financials, did you not?
I did, but I didn't go into the specifics of every single transaction. But I agree, I did sign off. But there are omissions. It is a liability anyway. So the issue is whether it should have been separately disclosed or whether it's been lumped up into loans.
Ms. Natterson,
Chair, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. Mr. Natterson, don't answer any further questions regarding the financials, because at the end of the day, no explanation has been given as to the relevance.
Mr.
number
Pienaar.
one. And number two,
Mr. Pienaar,
unfortunately, you've made it clear that there
Mr.
are discrepancies and errors in the financials, and you're now testifying as regards incorrect financials and incorrect financial accounting. It doesn't take the matter any further. So please, don't answer any further questions on this matter, and we'll continue with the other line of questioning, and we'll come back to this once the accounting records have been rectified.
Mr. Pienaar, are you an admitted attorney or are you counsel?
I'm an admitted attorney with rights of appearance.
Where do you practice?
Johannesburg,
What's the address where you practice?
Melrose Arch.
Sorry?
In Melrose Arch.
You don't have a right to tell a witness who is giving evidence whether to answer or not to answer a question.
I have every right.
If you think there is a problem with a question, you make submissions to me. I make a ruling. If you don't like the ruling, you know what your remedies are. But I make a ruling as to what questions the witness answers and what questions he may not answer. You can advise, but you can't
I've just advised.
direct him.
I've just advised.
Okay. Ms. Hofmeyer, please continue with your questions.
Thank you, Chair.
And there is no restriction at this stage. If there is any question that I think is irrelevant you are asking, I will intervene, or that I think is unfair. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Natterson, we began your testimony this morning looking at the code of practice of chartered accountants. Do you recall that?
Yes.
One of the obligations of a chartered accountant in business is to ensure that the information for which he is responsible describes clearly the true nature of the business transactions, assets or liabilities. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And that it represents facts accurately and completely in all material respects. Do you
Yes.
accept that?
Yes.
So when you signed off on the financial statements for the year ending February 2016, did you satisfy yourself that you'd met those requirements?
Chair, well, the answer is no. On the basis that I think the assumption being made is that I've been acting as the CA preparing the books of the company.
Yes.
Chair, my role in the company, I am CEO, I am in the field delivering projects. I've got an appointed accounting team and an external accounting firm that is responsible to prepare the books for me. So am I not entitled to
You
make
trust them.
I trusted their
You trust them
judgment
to
that
do
when they
the
bring me
the
books
job.
to sign, I'm no longer engaged in the day-to-day operations of the business. These requests are made to me where it's material. They've got delegations where they can approve certain expenses without even consulting with me. Anything above that, where it's material, they will contact me for a decision. and I spend, if you look at the affidavits from my PA and other staff, I spend 3 days a week outside the office, generally.
Yes.
So from that perspective, yes, I should be satisfying myself. I agree. But I'm also entitled to make reasonable assumptions that since we've got staff that are supposedly competent, that we've got contractors that are supposedly competent in helping me prepare the books, that by the time I get the books to sign off, I don't have to go and look into every single line item.
Ms. Natterson, you did accept earlier in your testimony that your signature on page 205 did signify that you had confirmed that the statements fairly represented the financial position of NAO Solutions at the end of February 2016. Do you recall that?
Yes, based on exactly the assumptions I've just explained, it's exactly, that is my actual signature. And when we come to the other financials, I'll actually explain that my electronic signature was used without me. So this one, I definitely signed myself. That you can see in the way I signed every other document. That is my actual physical signature.
But you now reflect, apologies, thank you, you now reflect at 207 there's an error. 9.9 million shouldn't have been allocated to loans from shareholders or directors, correct?
Yeah, it can be an error, but it's of no significance, even from a materiality perspective. It's
No.
not 9 point,
Ms. Natterson,
the
sorry,
net
my-
balance at year end would have been 2.6 million.
Ms. Natterson, my question was not about the net effect. My question is, I understood your evidence earlier to be, there's an error on page 207. The item under loans from shareholders or parties should be reduced by 9.9 million because it was an incorrect accounting entry to have put it in that figure.
No, that's not what I said.
Oh.
I said he posted the 9.9 million to my shareholders account, loan account incorrectly. This is the financial statement on the balance sheet. At year end, 7 million plus 300 was taken off. So the net balance here at year end at 2016 would have been the 2.6 million.
Oh, we were completely at cross purposes then. Are you saying the accounting treatment of these funds as a director's loan to the company is correct?
No, I'm not saying that at all.
Oh.
What I'm saying is my accountant had erroneously processed it to my loan account.
Could
The
we just
full-
stop there?
The full 9.9, right? Then I said that obviously there were drawings that he's taken off it. So at year end, the final balance at year end is not out by 9.9 million. It is out by 2.6 million, where there should have been a different line item as a liability for 2.6 million somewhere else.
Okay, we're dealing with two things there, Mr. Nasson. I really want to be clear about your evidence because I don't want in any way to have misunderstood it. Your evidence earlier was that, if we look at page 207, there's a line item there, loans from shareholders or other parties, which we have clarified is a director's loan from you to the company, correct?
Yes?
It's in the amount of 65 million. As I have your evidence, you said the 9.9 funds that had been received in November form part of that 65 million on this page, correct?
No. 9.9 million flows through that account. So the financials are prepared based on a general ledger. There's an account in the general ledger with my loan account on it, reflected there. So when the transaction happened of receiving the funds, the 9.9 million will hit that account. Yes, he erroneously posted it to my director's loan account instead of creating a suspense account, right? At year end, the debits to that account would have happened, which is the payments that he took out, the 7 million and the 300,000. So that would have come off. At this point in time, at the end of the financial year, there's only 2.6 million that affects this account.
So it shouldn't have been 9.9 in that line item, it should have been 2.6, correct?
Inside the 65.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
We are then on the same page. Why was it reflected as a director's loan when it was not money you gave to the company?
As I said, my accountant had erroneously posted it there. He ought to have created a suspense account and placed it in that suspense account. He didn't do that. He put it into my loan account.
When did you first detect that error?
I can't recall when it came about. I think it would have been only towards the end of the year, the financial year.
No, sorry. When did you identify your accountant's error in attributing it to your director's loan account?
I can't recall when it came about. I think it came about just before the end of the financial year. I can't
Sorry,
recall
which
the exact-
financial year?
The 2016 financial year.
Sorry, so you'd picked up the error before?
We picked up the error when we were preparing the books, right? Then, at that point in time, it was found that, well, remember we prepared the books later, so we prepare a pack towards the end of the financial year. So we don't
Yes.
capture pastel monthly. We capture pastel at the end of the year,
Yes.
almost like a shoebox audit. So we
Yes.
invoice 5 to 6 clients a month. We don't have more invoices than that. We've got
Yes.
no cash business coming in. So our revenue line is easy to monitor. On our cost line, we have vouchers. So every payment that goes out of the company, there's a voucher which determines where it's supposed to go. Eugene had incorrectly wrote on the voucher, he posted it to my shareholders loan account because he didn't know where else to post it. He should have ideally motivated to create a new line item for the suspense account for that. So I can't recall offhand exactly when it was detected. All I know, I was informed later it was detected that it was posted to the wrong place. But by that point in time, he had already drawn off his March payments because our pack was produced then. So we felt it was of no consequence that the funds were received and already paid out, and leaving it in that line item then became a formality as opposed to let's create an account and run it through there when the monies were actually reimbursed over time.
Mr. Natson, in fairness to you, I'm not asking for a specific date. What I'm really interested in is, did you pick up the error before you signed off on these financial statements for February 2016?
Before I signed off, definitely, because it was signed off many months later.
In August 2016, you'll
yes.
recall that, right?
Correct.
Then why, in your first interview with the Commission, which is transcribed, and in the statement that you signed, did you indicate that it had been allocated to your director's loan account and not raise any concerns about that?
But like I said, it was because by the time the pack was prepared, Van Wyk was already returned his money. So they treated it as it had flowed through already. What's the point of creating a new account and then closing it off immediately anyway?
So let's go to page 24 of DD 10A, if we may. And I'm interested in paragraph 11 there. That's where you deal with how you treated the transaction in your books. Do you see that?
Yes.
And from about the fourth line, you state there, the funds came as Mr. Van Wyk's dividend distribution from Coroneka. We'd accounted for these funds as a pass-through using my director's loan account of Neo Solutions, as the funds were to be held for a short while by us until Mr. Van Wyk required them. Do you see that?
Yes.
Is that consistent with what you told the investigators at the first meeting?
Yes.
Why did you not include here that there had been an erroneous accounting entry reflecting that?
I didn't go into that level of specifics. It was how it was treated. So it was treated exactly like that. I didn't say it was correct or not. It's how it happened.
Do you recall the investigators raising with you their concerns about its treatment as a director's loan?
Yes.
So and that was on the 15th of March 2016, correct?
Yes.
And you provided this statement signed on the 3rd of May 2016. Do you recall that?
Yes.
So by that stage, why did you not seek to clarify the position?
I had reflected it as it had happened there. So obviously when the commission required further detail is when we went and got that further detail to provide it to you. But at that point it was true to what I believe.
Mr. Natson, in the course of that engagement with the investigators on the 15th of March, the specific concern about the treatment of this money in the accounting records of Neo Solutions was raised, correct?
Yes.
And in particular, I can take you to the relevant page of the transcript. There was a concern raised by one of the investigators that this was all used as a diversion to legitimize the funds. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Thank you. I'd then like to just spend a...
Can I also clarify there?
Yes.
In that same session, in response to that assertion made by the investigators, I then said to them they needed to contextualize what had happened, because at that point I started feeling like I was the one being now analyzed as to whether I was complicit with the
Yes.
transaction. And I then said, in fact, I think straight after that, I asked to play the recording of a conversation I had with Van Wyk much later on, after having given the Section 204 affidavit, just to put that into perspective. So that was not that I accepted what was said
Yes.
by the investigators. I said, you guys are not believing me. Here's the proof that I was not aware that this was SA Express's money. Here's proof that Van Wyk had given me unequivocal confirmation that this was not SA Express's money, and it related to a Northwest project that he had earned income from. So on that basis, I was trying to show them that it was the wrong train of thought to try and say I'm washing this money for him deliberately or knowingly so.
Yes, thank you.
If we can just spend a little bit of time on the farming venture. I think we have advanced in your evidence today and clarified some of the aspects of what is contained in your previous affidavits, but I just want to be certain that I have the version accurately. Mr. Nasson, you're aware that the Commission has asked for all documents that Neo Solutions has in its possession in relation to the services it rendered, insofar as it was involved in the farming venture.
Yes?
And we have not today been provided with any invoices that Neo Solutions ever rendered in relation to those farming activities. Is that correct?
But like I explained, there cannot be an invoice until the entity is established and successfully implemented. So technically, all the work that we did in the farming venture was written off because it could not realize revenue. If we never got to the farm, there's no entity to bill.
I understand, and as I understand your evidence earlier, you were doing this on a success fee basis.
That's
so
correct.
You weren't
so
intending...
there won't be an invoice.
There won't be an invoice.
Because we would never gotten to a position of an entity to recover funds from for the work that we had performed.
I understand that, Mr. Nasson, and I understand your evidence earlier to have accepted that at least between November 2015 and March 2016, the funds that you were holding were not going to be deployed for the farming venture, correct?
Repeat the question?
In the period November 2015 to March 2016, those 9.9 million rands of funds were not going to be utilized in the farming venture.
Yes.
Correct.
Correct.
Thank you. That does speed things up a bit. I'd then like to go to certain of the observations in relation to the evidence that we have traversed thus far, because it is appropriate, in fairness to you, Mr. Natterson, that I indicate to you what certainly my understanding of your evidence has been thus far, and then to ask you for your comment. Mr. Natterson, is it correct that you never regarded the 9.9 million that you received from Mr. Van Wyk via Coroneca to be revenue in the hands of Neo Solutions?
That's correct.
And is it correct that if it had been, that would have had tax implications for Neo Solutions?
Yeah, well, it would have been revenue, which meant it would have come into our income statement, and then definitely a tax implication.
And the tax implication as the company tax rate would have been 28% of that amount, correct?
Correct.
You also accept, I understand it in your evidence today, that it was not correct to reflect that money as a director's loan to the company, correct?
Correct.
And you also accept today that if we go and look at the bank statements of Neo Solutions in February 2016, and it does not show an available 2.6 million rand in the hands of Neo Solutions, then Neo Solutions made use of or whatever portion it was not available at year end of those monies it had received from Mr. Van Wyk.
In terms of the funds, yes. I said in theory, yes.
Yes. Of course, this is hypothetical. We don't have those statements yet, but if we get them and they confirm that, your answer will be they were put to financial use within the company, correct? And if that is to be the case, then paragraph 14 of your 204 declaration would be incorrect, because you'll recall paragraph 14 said that Neo Solutions had received no financial benefit whatsoever of the 9.9 million that you'd received from Mr. Van Wyk, correct?
I think on the basis that the liability is still there of returning his money to him, then I would say no. We have not, ultimately, obviously, we've got to look at the financial statements or the bank statements, but we would have had facilities available to settle him should he require his money earlier.
But you would have utilized the funds in the interim.
It was sitting in the same bank account. It's a rolling bank account. So I would see it as incidental. We didn't move it to any separate trust account. It was kept in our main operational account.
Mr. Natterson, with everything you know now about the transactions that Neo Solutions engaged in with Mr. Van Wyk, I'm going to ask you a few questions about your knowledge of money laundering. Do you know what money laundering is?
Yes.
Just for our purposes, it may be useful just to look at the definition, because there are aspects of it that I would like to put to Mr. Natterson. You'll
Yes.
find them in the file in front of you containing the aviation legislation. Chair, you should have that available to you. I requested that it be put in the box next to you.
Yes.
And if we turn that up, the first item there of legislation is the Prevention of Organized Crime Act. And you'll pick it up at page 17 within that act. There is a definition provided of money laundering. Do you have that, Mr. Natterson?
Yes.
So section 4 there gives us a definition of money laundering. It says any person who knows or ought reasonably to have known that the property, and just to assist you, property is defined to include monies, forms part of the proceeds of unlawful activities, and A, enters into any agreement or engages in any arrangement or transaction with anyone in connection with that property, whether such agreement, arrangement, or transaction is legally enforceable or not, or performs any other act in connection with such property, whether it is performed independently or in concert with any other person. And now it qualifies what that arrangement must do. It says it's an arrangement which has or is likely to have the effect of concealing or disguising the nature, source, location, disposition, or movement of the said property or ownership thereof, or any interest which anyone may have in respect thereof. I'd like to stop there. Sub 2 is not relevant, and it indicates that a person who does that shall be guilty of an offence. Do you see that?
Yes.
Mr. Natterson, we've probed with you today the steps that you took to interrogate what Mr. Van Wyk was telling you about why he wanted to put these funds into Neo Solutions. You've had questions from the chair and from myself as to what to make and what you did make of the explanations given by Mr. Van Wyk. Mr. Natterson, if I put it to you that in the light of what he said, what you did ask and what you didn't ask, you ought reasonably to have known that those proceeds were the proceeds of unlawful activities, and that you facilitated an arrangement in which the source, location, movement, or distribution of those funds would be disguised or concealed. What would your comment be?
I disagree with that, Chair. The point is, Van Wyk is a CA himself, right? He became a friend. He was, and maybe to an extent I dropped my guard with the extent of questions I should have asked, but within the context that he's a chartered accountant as well. He is obviously bound by similar standards. He's given me undertakings that the money is from a reputable source, and I did ask that question several times. So on the basis of that, I don't believe that I acted unreasonably in these circumstances. When it came to my attention from UDEAL that the transaction was not appropriate, I immediately cooperated to say, but I've not done anything wrong. Here's the evidence to support what has happened, and I immediately cooperated with the authorities to share that. So it was at that point in time, in the circumstances as at October 2015, I felt I acted reasonably. I asked the questions to confirm that the monies would not bring any risk to my company or myself. And he gave me undertakings to that effect, using a similar set of standards that I'm being measured on now. So on that basis, I don't believe that I violated POCA. Okay, and that's the honest truth, that's what happened at that point in time.
Yes.
Mr. Nasson, there is also on that same page the crime of assisting another to benefit from the proceeds of unlawful activities. That is Section 5. Do you see that?
Yes.
And Mr. Nasson, that occurs, I'm going to paraphrase just for the purposes of expedition, but if there's an aspect you want to look at in particular, you must let me know. A person is guilty of a crime under Section 5 if that person knows or ought reasonably to have known that another person has obtained the proceeds of unlawful activities and who then enters into an arrangement whereby the retention of the money is facilitated or the proceeds are used to make funds available to that person. And your comment on whether you participated in the commission of that offence?
At that point in time, no. Obviously now with the benefit of hindsight, there's a lot of things that I've been misled on that I wasn't privy to at the time. He had said specifically it was a dividend coming in as an investment into where he was going. So I relied on his assertions around that. So I didn't willingly create, there was no illegal activity anywhere in my mind at that point in time.
And ought you reasonably to have known?
The question is then, what other steps could I have taken to verify that at that point in time? I don't have access to verify, is this a dividend? You understand? So from the questions I asked him, I relied on his verbal assertions. There's no other means I've got to go and say, show me the proof of your dividend. I mean, I didn't know I had an obligation in that regard. But ultimately, just taking what we are calling a reasonable man test today, or just from a moral compass today, did you earn these funds legitimately, is what I asked, and he said it was a dividend from an enterprise. And also bear in mind, Van Wyk never dropped names, like we've been hearing from the other evidence. He's never dropped names of people he's engaging with in government and so on. So from all the scenarios put together, all he told me was he was a government employee, not happy being in government, going back to private sector, to be honest.
Mr. Nasson, the other option available to you, I suggest, is that you could have said, there's enough about your story, Mr. Van Wyk, that's not stacking up, and I decline to allow you to use my company to house your funds. Do you agree that that was available to you?
I agree that was a possibility, but I never saw it as illegal funds that he was getting, because I never got that impression at that point in time.
I'm focusing now on not necessarily your knowledge of illegality, because we're not in the knowledge sector, we're in the sector of what a reasonable person in your position would have done. Do you accept that a reasonable person in your position would have said, I'm worried about his reference to lifestyle audits. I'm worried about the fact that he doesn't want it to hit his bank account. I'm worried about my company being used to move proceeds that really should sit with him. Do you accept a reasonable person would have come to that view on the basis of what he said?
I don't agree with that. Because the questions I asked, he had answered.
Maybe that
Yes.
there were other questions that may have been asked. But you've given us your answer on your version that those questions wouldn't have been asked by a reasonable person in the circumstances.
As I said, Chair, my guard was dropped because he was operating, I'm assuming, on similar standards to me. So on that basis, maybe then I let him through. Because if I was dealing with a person who's never had that kind of background or history, yes, then I would have asked the questions you're talking about. But he's a chartered accountant. He was private sector trained. So on that basis, I'm working that he's done the homework.
And your knowledge of him being a chartered accountant, how do you know that, Mr.
He told me
Mason?
that.
Did you ever verify it?
I didn't verify it, but he told me, he gave specifics that he was BMW trained. He wasn't an auditor accountant. He was trained outside public practice, so not an auditor style one, but he did say that he served these articles top style through BMW.
And were you aware whether he was a member of SAICA at all?
I didn't verify that. I took it on face value that he was.
Thank you.
Did would you accept that from what he told you, he wanted to hide this money? Do you accept that on what he told you,
I think,
he wanted to
as I
hide
said,
the money?
the benefit of hindsight now is that that's been proven true. He wanted to hide the money. At that point in time, that thought didn't cross my mind.
Well, I wonder why it didn't cross your mind when he said he didn't want his employer to know about it. That should have told you he was hiding the money from his employer, at least.
At least from his employer, yes. That I understood to be true. But
So-
not for SARS or anything else. I assume that he's done all these other disclosures.
Yes,
related
but
to
once you accepted that he wanted to hide the money, that shouldn't that have heightened your suspicion to say, I don't want to have anything to do with money that's being hidden?
Chair, I think the point is, the monies, he always gave the undertakings that the monies were clean, and it was from a source not related. Yes, he hid it from his employer because he was leaving. He always said he had served his notice, he's on his way out, and he's informed his employer he's on his way out. And he mentioned the jealousy thing. So I took it on that face value.
Thank you.
Ms. Nasson, did he specifically say to you he'd informed his employers that he was on his way out and he was in the midst of serving his notice period?
Yes, that's what he said.
In
There was always the
October
June-
of 2015?
Yeah, that was his plan. I'm not sure. He said he had informed them that he did not wish to renew and that he was planning to exit at the end of June.
Thank you. Mr. Natterson, I'd now like to deal with the 300,000 Rand cash, which I've consistently promised today we would get to, and I'd like to now go there. Mr. Natterson, as I understand your evidence on that, let's maybe go to your Section 204 declaration, if we may, and pick it up at page 8.
Are we changing the
We are.
volumes?
We are changing the point, and I see it is 4 o'clock, Chair.
Yes. How long do you think you'll need to take?
Chair, I have 3 topics.
Yeah.
I expect no more than an hour at maximum.
Mr. Pinar, please come forward. We want to proceed until we finish, if that's convenient to everybody. Is that fine with you?
Chair, I would have to say it's not convenient for various personal reasons.
Yes.
I assumed that this inquiry was going to finish at 4. If we have to stay, we have to stay.
Yes, 4 is our normal time, but sometimes we extend. But I always check with everybody that's involved whether that's convenient. So that's why I'm asking you whether it's convenient.
Would it not be convenient to pick this up when we continue?
I'm sorry.
Would it not be convenient to pick this up when we continue the next time?
The problem is that Monday we have other witnesses, so it might take quite a long time before we do that, and we try to avoid that where we can. If the
reason I
amount
ask,
of
sorry,
time-
Chair, the reason
Yes.
I ask is that this is a new issue, the 300,000, unrelated to the inquiry that's just taken place regarding the financials and POCA and FICA. So it would make sense to, in fact, start it with a new chapter when we recommence.
It may, in terms of just dividing, but I'm just wondering whether, one, bearing in mind that it's only a short amount of evidence, relatively speaking, that is left, and 2, maybe the cost and inconvenience of you and your client having to come back some other time when we could otherwise finish.
I think we're going to have to come back anyway by the sounds.
Sorry?
I think we're going to have to come back anyway by the looks of things.
It may be. So what is your you would prefer to
My recommendation is we've just finished the inquiry
Yeah.
on the legislation and on the financials. This is a brand new issue that we commence with it next time. We know where we're leaving it off. We know that there are 3 subjects to be dealt with in relation to the 300. We can pick that up when we start next time.
Let me hear what Ms. Hofmeyer has to say.
Just to correct one aspect, it's not 3 topics in relation to the 300. There are at least 3 further topics I'd like to
Yes.
explore in the evidence,
Yes.
just so that what I've stated is not misinterpreted.
Yes.
Chair, we really are in your hands. We, as the legal team and assistants, we're able to stay on, but I do understand my learned friend if he's made other arrangements. We did not traverse with him in advance the possibility of staying later. My assumption had in fact been that we would finish at 4, but it has
Yes.
taken a bit longer in the
Yes.
course of the day.
Yes.
Chair, the challenge would be when we would return, given the tight timetable of the Commission.
Yes.
We could approach you on that. The only other thing that occurs to me is that there are numerous other documents that Mr. Natterson has not yet provided to the Commission.
Yes.
And it may, in fact, facilitate the conclusion of his evidence if those are provided in the interim, and then he can return after those documents have been received to complete his evidence.
Yes. No, that's fine. I think we may adjourn, not to a specific date. A date will be determined, will be fixed. But in the meantime, whatever documents that Mr. Natterson may be owing to send to the Commission may do so, and then he will come back and then finish the evidence. Probably because it's evidence that might take about an hour. Probably we might, I might hear his evidence maybe from 9 up to 10 on a particular morning before the witness for the day starts at 10. So those arrangements, that is what we may have to do. All right, Mr. Natterson, obviously you have been hearing everything that has been said. We are going to adjourn now because your legal representatives had made other plans on the basis that we finish at 4. And the legal team had not had a chance to speak to him in advance about the possibility that we could go beyond 4 o'clock. Arrangements will be made and a date will be fixed when you can come back and complete your evidence.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. You are excused for today. That is all for the day.
Indeed, Chair.
We are going to adjourn now. We adjourn.